There's three things that are the most common mistake I see, that either it's a mistake made by a homeowner or a mistake made by a contractor. Number one, one of the number one most mistakes I run into, and it's one of the biggest or most repairs that I have to make, is coming up to a leak at a job that it's either a main line or a lateral line, and the pipe was not ever glued right. And I say glued, it's a solvent welding, but most people say glue, so I'm going to say glue also. But the most common mistake I see is there wasn't either enough primer wasn't used, or enough glue wasn't used, or it wasn't totally butted up to the end of the fitting. And so there's several things there that go wrong, but when you don't solvent weld your joints, pipe, when it's a pipe going in a bell end or a pipe going in a fitting, when you don't do that right, it might hold for a little bit, but most times I get called on things to leaks, and that's the reason why, is because it wasn't done right in the first place. Guys, we've got to try to make sure we are doing it right, but we're also teaching the guys we're working around to solvent weld everything the way it's supposed to be done. If we do that, the system, the fittings, everything that's glued together is going to last a really long time. But if you don't, things blow apart after a time. I just did one yesterday. That's one of the things why this is on my mind. Did one yesterday. The pipe was in a bell end only about this much. And I mean, I'm talking a 1/4 inch into a bell end that's probably 2 inches long. And so it was barely in there, and it didn't have hardly any glue on it at all. I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. Because that way, if you do it right and follow all the right steps and procedures, those fittings are going to stay glued together for a long time. And you're going to be happy. Your sprinkler system's going to work great, and you're not going to be wasting any water that's from a leak running down the street or anything like that. So that's number one. Number two of the most common mistakes I run into a lot is having the wrong nozzle inside of a head. And what I mean is, if you're not familiar with it, there's a sprinkler head. There could be a rotor head that shoots one stream out, or it could be a spray head that does little mist that comes out. There's a nozzle that goes inside of the head. And the nozzle, picking the right nozzle, is very, very important. But a lot of times I go into a job and I get calls about, hey, things aren't working right. Well, I got one not too long ago where it was a rotor zone, and things were, I mean, it was barely coming out of the rotors. But I started looking at, well, what nozzles do they have in there? Well, they had a mix matched with the 6s, 7s, 8s. I mean, it was basically, they went down the nozzle tree and just put one in each head and weren't paying attention to the flow through those nozzles, precipitation rate through those nozzles, or anything like that. And so you're trying to push too much water through that particular zone. That's why it wasn't working. The thing is, when you pick the wrong nozzle, you can really wreak a lot of havoc on your sprinkler system and your landscaping. And so sometimes when you put the wrong nozzle in, the system just will not work at all. But there's other times you put the wrong nozzle in and it's flooding an area. And so you don't want to do that either. You really want to pay attention to what you're doing. You want to match the precipitation rates, but you also want to install nozzles that are designed to be in the particular zone. If it just have a short amount of time and you want to try to figure out, okay, what nozzle needs to go in this head, there's some easy things you can do. One is, if they're in a line, the heads are in a line, go look at the heads on each side. If you broke one, or there's one broke or mowed off, go look at the heads on each side and see what nozzle is there. A lot of times, if those haven't been broke already, they'll have the same nozzle, and then you'll know, hey, if it's a 10-foot half, put a 10-foot half in there. Or you can step off the area, see how wide the area is. If you step it off and it's only 8 foot wide, you know you want to pick some sort of nozzle that only sprays 8 feet. It's one of the most common mistakes I see is people using the wrong nozzle. You got to make sure you pay attention and you do these things right. Picking the right nozzle is one of them. Now the third thing, one of the other common mistakes I see when I come up to a job, and it could be commercial or residential, is the programming of the sprinkler controller. Now sometimes they can be confusing, and I understand that. And there's some brands out there that are hard to figure out. It's funny. Some old Rainbird controllers sometimes it's like, how do you turn this one on manually? And I'm like, man, I have to go through the whole process to figure it out again. But there's also a couple older model sprinkler controllers that are just a pain to operate. So I understand, I get that. But we need to make sure we are programming these controllers right. Most programmers have several different programs, an A, B, and a C is very common to have those 3 different programs. Well, if you're only watering on 2 days a week and you want to water through the whole entire system on those days, you can utilize just one program, like program A, and that works great. Well, a lot of times what I'll see is they programmed A in there, and then at some point somebody hit the program button and it flipped to B. Whoever was programming it, either it being the homeowner or a maintenance guy or somebody, didn't realize which program was supposed to be running everything. Then they program it all. Now it's all in B also, with start times, multiple start times, and things like that. And I've also seen it where then there was program C that had another random amount of run times and things like that. And it's like, whoa. And they talk about their system not working right. Well, what happens is, if a system is not designed to run more than one zone at a time, and you start a program and another program wants to start on top of that, and it comes back to another zone, it's trying to run 2 at the same time. If the system wasn't designed for that, it's not going to work. And so that's and I get calls on, man, it's coming on at weird random times. Well, they had 15 different run times on 3 different programs, it seems like. And yeah, it's let's start this completely over right here. And sometimes you have to do that. Just clear it all out. Either reset it or just zero everything, see what's there, and start over on the programming. And so it's one of the things, you need to make sure you're on the right program, and you go through all the steps in that program. Start times, run times, days to water, seasonal and adjust. Guys, make sure when you're doing an initial program, the seasonal adjust is set to 100. Your max programming time needs to be programmed at seasonal adjust to 100%. Then you can go and play with that seasonal adjust throughout different parts of the year to adjust those run times. Great way to do it. Really cool feature. Run times is one of the other things. Guys, running a spray head 20 minutes is way too long. Really, anywhere you're at, any system you're running, 20 minutes on a spray head is too long. What's going to happen is, about half of that time, the water is just probably going to either run off. Especially if it's windy, like it is in West Texas, half that water is just going to go down the street. You're wasting water, bad deal. The other half is if the soil can't take 20 minutes of that spray head, then it's going to fill up, and then the rest of it's going to run off. And so it's really not a good time. 20 minutes at one time on a spray head is, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, is way too long. It's not a good, efficient way to do it. Now, if you are running them 10 minutes and you want to run through twice, let the system run through and sit for an hour or two, then run it through again. That's a great way to do it. And that gives you more water at that particular watering time, especially if you can only water 2 days a week and you want to run through twice. You're allowed to do that, but you want to be smart about how you do that. Now, I will say this. I did learn something last year. I played around with some run times and start times on a particular job. I had a strip of grass next to an access road of a highway. When you ran that thing too long, there was a lot of runoff. And so I bumped it down to run only 5 minutes. But I did 3 different start times. And I come to find out the 5 minutes was not long enough per time, and so a lot of that water either wasn't going down deep enough because the 5 minutes wasn't long enough, or it was evaporating faster than it could get down, and so it didn't work. And so you want to be careful. You want to kind of play with it, some of it too. You want to watch. This year, that was last year. This year I'm going to try something a little bit different on that particular job. Sometimes it's good to do as long a watering as you can, like a deep root type watering that's longer. And if you want to add a little bit more to it, then come around again with either the same time or a less amount of time, just to add a little bit more water into it. So sometimes you do need that deeper deeper root watering that requires a little bit longer, but not too long, because you're going to create a lot of runoff and wasting a lot of water. Those are the 3 biggest mistakes I see: is Either pipes not being glued right, the nozzles not being right on a job, or number 3, it was the programming of the sprinkler controller. So those are the 3 main things we need to correct and we need to get right. If we can all do our best to be the best irrigators we can be, we're going to have some good sprinkler systems and some good looking landscaping. And when all that comes together, man, you can look over there and you've got a yard that looks great and system works great, and it's really something you can enjoy and it's something you can be proud of.